Yeah, after I talked with Pastor Gregory this morning, I actually went and jumped on a lawnmower because we had to finish mowing last week. And I was mowing away. I was like, I really need to stop for lunch. And the clouds were just starting to move in. And so I decided that I had better finish what I was doing. So I finished what I was doing, and about 30 minutes later, it cut loose. So I was glad I finished what I needed to do. My name is Micheal Gay. I'm the president at Siloam Missionary Homes now. I've been on staff for a little over 4 years. And I was talking with Pastor Gregory back here, and we know all kinds of pastors in common and people in common, and found out we had quite a few connections that we didn't know that we had. He asked me if I knew a Pastor Derek Smith, and I said, yes, I do. I just spoke at his church for 2 weeks. And he said, well, he's got COVID too. I said, well, I was scheduled to speak at his church a year ago, and it got canceled because he got COVID a year ago. This time I spoke when he was on vacation. Apparently while he was on vacation, he got it again. So, man. All right. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity just to come and share the ministry of Siloam and what is going on and kind of what's happening. How many of you have ever been to Siloam Missionary Homes? A little over half. All right. Well, I've got, here in a moment, we're going to take a little short tour of Siloam, not a super long and not of all the houses. But I just want to share for those of you that haven't been there, Larry and Joyce started the ministry 30 years ago, so we're now in our 30th year of ministry. When the ministry started, it was with 16 acres and lots of trees and nothing else but a bunch of trees on those 16 acres. And now we have a 33-acre main campus with 15 homes and several other buildings. 13 of those homes are missionary homes. And we also have another 10 acres off-site that has been donated to us about 4 years ago, and we have a small farm there, and one of our staff members lives on the farm. And so total we have about 44 acres. And in that time period of the 30 years, we've had over 300 missionary families stay with us, and from nearly 100 different countries. And right now we actually have all but 2 of our houses are full, but we've actually got a family scheduled to come into one of those homes in a couple of weeks. And then the other one that's empty is scheduled to be filled in about 4 weeks. So we have, since COVID started, we have been basically at 100% occupancy since COVID started. So we've had gaps here and there, but they've all been really, really short, a couple weeks at a time at most. And normally we've got somebody moving out on a Friday and somebody moving in on a Monday. So we've been very, very busy. We are blessed that we just got our occupancy permit on our 13th home. So we had an old mobile home that took its last breath and it died. And so we had it hauled off and we put a new modular in its place. And God provided all the funds so that the modular was able to be built and put in place with no debt. And one of the local church associations raised funds to furnish the house. So between some used things and some new things, we've been able to furnish the house, and we've got a family moving in 2 weeks into that home. So we're very excited that God has provided that for us, and excited about what God is doing. So I just want to, why don't I take you on a little tour of Siloam? You can just start that. It's going to cycle through, I think. It should be on a timer. Hopefully it'll start back up. Mm-hmm. Maybe. We'll see. You might have to restart.
Hit escape and then hit F5 again.
There we go. All right. He restarted. I'm just gonna talk about a few things as it goes. It's really short. I just put this together for a church, for a pastor's conference that we were just at, just so people could see the campus a little bit. This is one of our typical homes. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, about 1,500 square feet. Most of our homes are about that size. The chapel is a place where the families can pray, can have meetings. Sometimes the preachers will do Zoom conferences from the chapel. But our families come and they stay here at a reduced cost. So we charge them about $500 a month plus utilities for them to stay at Siloam Missionary Homes. This is the typical inside of one of the homes. We provide them fully furnished so that all they have to do is move in with their luggage and themselves. We have a food store on the right there and a barber shop on the left that they can use to cut hair for their families, their kids. We have everything from a 500 square foot apartment, that's what this one is, all the way up to a 3,000 square foot home. We actually redid the inside of this apartment a couple years back just to make it a little more friendly and relaxing, I guess. We have a recreation center for teenagers and kids with a fitness center on the other end of this for the adults. This is the largest home on the campus. It's the 3,000 square foot home, and it'll hold up to a family of about 14. And we had some issues with some water damage in this one, so we actually redid this entire room, flooring, subfloor, and the walls to make it a little nicer. And we also have a farm on site. We raise sheep, goats, and alpacas, and we use them as part of our ministry with the children. We allow them to go in with the animals once they've gone through the training, and then they're able to do that with their families, and it just gives them a way to kind of de-stress and get to know God's nature, and just have time together as a family. This is actually the house next door to me, because I live on campus as well, and that's the house on the back side of campus, back by my house. Then that's our family center where we have our offices, a library, dining room, and kitchen. And we use that for a lot of our fellowships with the missionaries. And one of our most recent work teams actually brought and donated all the items to create a little play corner in the building for kids. That's kind of a quick tour. That's the end of the slides. That's kind of a quick tour of the campus. What can I do so this doesn't squeal as much? He has an idea. Okay, I'll try not to bump that. All right. So hopefully it'll be a little better. It's still doing a little bit, not nearly as bad. So a little bit more about I just want to share with you, how many of you know Larry and Joyce? A couple of you. I met Larry and Joyce probably 12 years ago. I actually attend the church that they were attending when Siloam Missionary Homes was started. Try that instead. Yep.
Watch it starts popping and cracking when it's turned off. There we go.
All right.
That should do it.
All right, he gave me this. That's much, much better. Okay. So I met Larry and Joyce 11 or 12 years ago at the church that I attend now, and that was the church they attended when Siloam Missionary Homes was initially started. In fact, my pastor is a founding board member for Siloam Missionary Homes, and they came and spoke. And it was one of those things where my wife and I had been missionaries. We actually were planning to go to Quebec as church planters. We had raised about 80% of our support. We sold our house in South Carolina, moved up here temporarily, planning to then jump up to Quebec. We took one last deputation trip out to the Midwest, and my wife contracted Lyme disease for a second time. And it just really did a lot of damage to her physically. She was in pain all the time and really couldn't function much at all. And so at that point in time, we took a leave of absence from our mission board and said, okay, God, we don't know what's going on, but we'll just wait for your timing, and you'll have to direct us in whatever it is you want us to do next. So I got a job at Blue Cross Blue Shield in North Carolina, and we started attending Bethel Baptist Church in Graham. And so when Larry and Joyce came and spoke, it was one of those things where I'd been on deputation. I knew what it was like to pay for a house but not live in the house, to have the worry of, is somebody breaking into my house? Is my house being taken care of while I'm gone? And all the hassle and stress that went with that. So when we heard about Siloam Missionary Homes, I was like, well, I wish I'd have known about that when I was on deputation. But it was one of those things that kind of stuck in the back of my head as, well, that's really neat. But I didn't really think anything more of it at the time. So fast forward about 7 years, and I was on the missions committee at my church. And one day, Pastor Jackson came in and said, We really need to pray for Siloam Missionary Homes and Larry and Joyce, because Larry has just been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and they're not sure what they're going to do. So God used hearing about it several years before, and then that, and I could not, it wasn't like before where it went in my head, I thought it was neat, and then it went out of my head. This time it's stuck in my head, and I just could not get Siloam Missionary Homes out of my head. I'd never been there before. I'd only heard Larry and Joyce speak one time. I knew we supported them, but I really didn't know anything about it. And finally I went to Pastor and I was like, I really need to go see this place. I just, for some reason, I can't get this place out of my head. You know I want to be back in ministry, but God has just not opened that door. So we arranged to go on a tour. He took me on a Saturday morning, and we met with Larry and Joyce, and Larry took us on a tour, and then we just kind of sat and talked for a little while. So when we left the Siloam Missionary Homes, we went down to the stop sign, and he just paused. He stopped and just kind of paused, and we looked at each other, and I said, do you think there'd be a place for me there? And he said, I think you'd be an answer to prayer. And so 3 weeks later, I think, I joined the board, and then started actually volunteering there 1 day a week. My boss let me work from home from Siloam. So I actually lived in Eflin. I drove from Eflin to Snow Camp and volunteered there and worked there 1 day a week doing accounts receivable and just kind of being in the office and part of what they were doing, just to get to, is this really what God might have for us? And he just really made it clear for both myself and my wife that Siloam Missionary Homes was where he wanted us to be. And so we took a leap of faith about 1.5 years later. And so 4 years ago in April, I joined the staff. And then 2 months later, we moved to Siloam and lived on site in one of the missionary homes for a couple of months while we were finishing a new home for Larry and Joyce. And so then, once their home was completed, I moved into the old director's home, which is where I live now. And so that's how God took us to Siloam. I used to say, I will be honest and say, in my spiritual immaturity, I said that God had taken us on a detour, that my time at Blue Cross was a detour. But I realize now that it never was a detour, because God always knows where we're supposed to go. He always knows what his plan is, and he always knows what he wants us to do and where he wants us to be. So it was not a surprise to God that we did not make it to Quebec and we ended up at Siloam. It was a surprise to me, I can tell you. But I look back now and I say, you know what? God had a perfect plan. While I was at Blue Cross, I had the opportunity to work as the operations manager for the Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation. And one of the things the foundation did was training nonprofits and nonprofit leaders on how to run a nonprofit, how to fundraise, and how to be successful with your nonprofit. So I had 7 years of attending all these conferences for free because I was a staff member. So I got to benefit from all of that, plus just the experience of doing the operations side of a nonprofit. So I look back now and know that God had his perfect hand in all that. He just took us on a path that we didn't expect to go on. So then Larry's Parkinson's has progressed some. He's actually doing pretty well, but he decided last year that it was time for him to step down. So he retired in June. And you'll be thrilled to know that he was working part-time. He is still working part-time for someone doing shipping and receiving, but he just took a position as associate pastor at Morris Chapel in Saxbahaw, and he's doing outreach and evangelism and visitation for the church. And so Joyce now gets to experience being a pastor's wife, and every Monday or Tuesday when she comes in, she says, "This is all so new to me. I've never been a pastor's wife before." So she works in the office 3 days a week now. She's back down from 5 days a week to 3 days a week. And now she and Larry are in ministry together at Morris Chapel. So it has been very good to see him doing that. And so he just called me over the weekend. He said, "We're having a missions conference at Morris Chapel. You're invited. You're going to come speak, and hopefully we're going to take you on." So he's still trying to raise money for Siloam, and if you know him, you're not surprised by that at all. I have a lot to learn in the whole asking for money thing, because he had not a shy bone in his body about asking for things. But God has been good, and we and our little staff of 8 are continuing to keep the ministry going. I just wanted to share a little scripture with you. Matthew chapter 11, 28 through 30. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's the verse that talks about bearing burdens and the fact that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. That's the phrase that I really want to focus on. One of the things that I think sometimes we forget as Christians is that pastors, missionaries, anybody in full-time Christian service, guess what? They're not super people. They're not made of iron or made of steel. They get sick. They get tired. They struggle. Believe it or not, I know this may be shocking to some, but they get depressed sometimes. They feel alone sometimes. And one of the reasons that Siloam Missionary Homes exists is not just to provide them with a house. Anybody can provide a house. You've probably gone on vacation and you stayed in places that it was a place to sleep, but that's about all it was. It did not feel like home. I'm very picky when I go on vacation. I like to stay at places that are nicer than my house, but still feel homey. I like to feel comfortable. I like to feel like I can kick off my shoes, put my feet up, and just relax. And that's part of what we want for the missionaries. But it goes beyond that. Because when these missionaries come back, they have faced so many things, so many different difficulties, so many struggles, and sometimes they feel like they don't have anybody to share that with. They feel like they can't unburden themselves. I mean, think about it. If they go to their sending church and go up to their sending pastor and say, "Hey, pastor, my wife and I are depressed right now. We've faced some issues, we've faced some struggles on the field, and we're depressed." Some of the missionaries would be afraid their church would drop them. And unfortunately, some churches would. That's sad, but it's the reality. Or maybe their mission board representative, they don't want to share some of the struggles. Maybe one of their children is, in today's world, it's not uncommon even for people in Christian service for their children to all of a sudden struggle with sexuality. It happens. Do you go to your mission board and say, "One of my children feels like there might be a homosexual"? What are you going to do? Who are you going to seek counsel from? Who are you going to turn to? And that's one of the things we can provide, because we're not tied to a mission board. We're not tied to a church. We're not tied to a specific ministry. We're just providing a place of security and peace where families can come and heal, where they can study God's Word, where they can pray, where they can seek counsel if they need to. We have, actually, you got your VBS decorations from Riverside. Our staff missionary, our pastor for our missionaries goes to Riverside, him and his wife. We have a pastor on staff specifically to counsel the missionaries and provide guidance and support and prayer when needed. But we also have partnerships with some very good Christian counselors in the area who, if the problems are greater and need more in-depth counseling, we can direct people to that. And they're able to just do what they need to do at Siloam because they're part of a community, but they're part of it in whatever way they need to be part of it. If they need privacy for several months, then we're going to give them privacy for several months. If they need to be with people because they're tired of being isolated, then come on out, get involved, do things. We had a family about 3 years ago. It was not too long after I joined the staff, and they had left a Central American country that was in the middle of a war. There was a coup that happened in their city, and when they literally walked out of their house with what they could carry, and that's all they had. And when they got out of their apartment and walked in the streets, people were dying in the streets. People were being shot, people were being blown up, people were being burned, and their kids witnessed all this as they left the country. So when they got back to the United States, they went to their mission board in New York, and they had triplets, teenage triplets, and the kids were completely traumatized and just shut down. They didn't want to talk to anybody, they didn't want to do anything, they were just completely shut down. So their mission board actually sent them to Siloam because there's a counselor in Chapel Hill that specializes in trauma like that. So for 6 weeks, they told us before they came, they said, the parents, we're gonna interact. But the kids, they're probably not gonna do anything with anybody because of what they've been through. And they didn't. And you know what? That was okay, because that's what they needed. We have a group of families right now. It's 3 families that are missionaries together as a team, and they're headed to the United Kingdom as a missionary group. And they were staying somewhere recently, and their team leader got carbon monoxide poisoning, severe carbon monoxide poisoning. His wife recovered, but he basically had a stroke from the carbon monoxide. So he's relearning to walk, relearning to eat, relearning how to balance. And so they had been staying in a really, really small cabin for several months before a spot opened up at Siloam for them to come. And when they arrived here, each of the families has at least one teenage kid. One of the families actually has 7 kids total. But every single family, the kids just jumped right in. So we have 3 teenagers every day that hang out with us all day long, that want to learn, that help out on the farm. One of the kids is like 12 going on 30. He wants to understand how everything works. He wants to understand, if you take this apart, what are all the pieces? How do they go back together? And how does this run? He has so many questions. So he hangs out with my maintenance guy all day, every day, because he loves it. And he's learning. He's very talented. He picks up quickly on things. And you know what? One of the grandmother of one of the teenagers said, before we came here, all the kids just wanted to hang out in their rooms, play video games, be on their phones, whatever. They didn't want to go outside. They didn't want to get up in the morning. They didn't want to do anything. Now they're ready to go at 7 o'clock in the morning. We can't keep them inside. This place has been so good for them. That's what Siloam Missionary Homes is. It's different for everybody. It's a place where they can get what they need to rest, refresh, and renew. So they can go back and do what they need to go back to the ministry. So let me just share a few things with you about Siloam. The passage that I mentioned, it's interesting because God tells us in that passage that He has the authority and the power to give us rest. Have you ever thought about it that way? When you're tired and worn out spiritually, that God has explicitly said in His Word, He has all power and authority to give us the rest we need. Isn't that amazing? When Jesus Christ ministered on this earth, what did He take time to do occasionally? He took time to rest. When He preached along the Sea of Galilee, and then they got in the boat and they were going across the Sea of Galilee, what was Jesus doing?
Mm-hmm.
He was sleeping. The disciples were talking and, whatever, worrying about the storm that was coming up. Jesus was tired. So He was sleeping. On more than one occasion, Christ went aside. What does that mean? He took time to rest and refresh and renew, because He knew the next stage of ministry was about to happen. And he was in a physical human body. He had to take care of it. And when He was tired, He had to rest. If Christ took time to rest, why would we expect that missionaries and pastors don't need time to rest as well? But God has the authority and the power, and wants to give us rest if we would just seek it from Him. And that's what we do at Siloam Missionary Homes, is we give the missionaries a place to find that rest. Some of the families come and stay for a couple weeks. Some of them stay for 6 months. Some of them stay for a year. It kind of depends on their circumstance. We are designed to just have them for short-term housing. But every circumstance is different. And we just want to whatever way we can. And it's just been amazing to see how God provides in ways that are just unimaginable. I was actually just reading a book, and one of the chapters, Small Voice. And the author of that actually happened. I love sharing this story. The first full summer I was at Siloam, Larry and Joyce took 2 trips. I'd actually been on the job all of, I think, 3 or 4 days when they took their first trip to Thailand for 30 days. So they were overseas on the opposite side of time. So they were like 11 or 12 or 13 hours ahead of us. And they took the trip in late July and early August. Well, in all honesty, at Siloam Missionary Homes, we rely on the giving of families and churches and individuals. And the summer tends to be a very slow time for us financially. And so we had reached the point where we had some significant bills that needed to be paid. Now, one thing we do, and I have these, if you aren't on our mailing list, I have our last newsletter that we sent out. One of the things that we have in our newsletter, on the back of the newsletter, is we have a little reminder of, if you haven't donated to us recently, we would love for you to consider giving to us again. And when we send out our newsletter, I mean, we can send out the newsletter and pretty much mark it down. Within a week, we're going to start getting envelopes back with the little slips and some donations. It happens. So we had gotten to the point where we had a $4,000 electric bill that was going to be due in 30 days. Larry and Joyce left to go to Thailand. And we sent out the newsletter. And we were just like, okay, God, you're going to provide the way you always provide. We sent out the newsletter, bring it in. Well, the next 2 weeks, not only did we not get any newsletter contributions, and I mean none. I think we got a total of 3 pieces of mail over the course of 2 weeks, which you all know, as an individual, you get all kinds of junk mail, right? So we should have at least gotten junk mail. I mean, even at Siloam, we get junk mail, and we get the mail for all like 15 people, so we should get lots of junk mail. We hardly got anything in the mail and no contributions. We were like, God, what are you doing? We have a need. You know what our need is. We're providing a service for these missionaries. You need to meet our needs too, just like we're here to meet the missionaries' needs. So what? And we prayed. I'm telling you, we prayed. And finally, it dawned on me, we kept praying, God, send in the newsletter money. That's what we were praying. And so, on a Sunday, the bill was due on a Wednesday. On a Sunday, it dawned on me that we were not giving God the freedom in the way we were praying to work in the way that He wanted to work. We were limiting Him because we were asking for something very specific. So, Monday morning, I talked to Milton, and I said, Pastor Milton, we need to pray different. I don't know what that is, but we need to pray different because what we're praying isn't being answered right now. Monday passed, Tuesday passed, Wednesday, now it's Wednesday morning, this bill is due. $4,000, it's our electric bill. If we don't pay it, we're all losing power. Not just us, but all the missionaries too. And so Wednesday morning, we sat in front of the computer of our bookkeeper and tried to figure out, we had like $180 in our account. How do you pay a $4,000 bill with $180? And I looked at Pastor Milton again, and I said, Pastor Milton, what are we supposed to pray? I don't know what to do. And then it's not like we could call Larry and have him work, some magic spiel where he'd go to ask somebody for money, because he was in Thailand. He was unreachable. So we talked that morning and said, do we put it on a credit card or do we just wait? And Betty and Milton and I, we all looked at each other and we said, God's going to provide. We're just going to wait. So at lunch, it was just before lunch, and this kind of started the whole thing. Just before lunch, our youngest staff member walked into the office. She was an intern at the time. Intern, not even a full staff member. Walked in and handed me an envelope. And I was actually sitting at Joyce's desk at the time. I took it and I was like, well, thank you. I didn't know what was in it. She's like, well, this is to help out. I'm like, well, she's an intern. She probably just gave me like $100. That's very sweet. So, I thanked her. She left. A few minutes later, we were talking about something. I opened up the envelope. It had $2,100 in it. $2,100 from our intern. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is definitely not what I expected at all. And while we were then sitting there, the phone rang. And it was a church in Durham. And the church said, we're at the end of our fiscal year and we have some money left in our hospitality fund. Do you have any needs that we can help out with? Why, yes. Yes, we do. So we told them what the need was. So they logged into our Randolph Electric account from Durham, used their church credit card, and they paid off all the electric bill. The entire thing. And you know what came in the very next day? Our newsletter envelope started coming in with contributions. I am not joking. And here I am, new to the ministry, to that particular ministry. I've been a missionary. I know what it is to rely on faith. I know what it is to rely on God. And what a lesson we learned that day, that week, that month, that sometimes we limit God with our prayers. Sometimes we're so focused on God, I need you to do this, and I need you to do it this way, that sometimes we forget that God's an amazing God. He's got all the power. He's got all the authority. Why would we limit him? And it was just an amazing biblical, spiritual lesson for us as a staff at Siloam. You know what it also did for us, now that we look back at it? It brought the core group that wasn't Larry and Joyce together in a way that we wouldn't have come together if they had been there. If Larry had just made a phone call to somebody and the money had come in, it wouldn't have taught us the lesson that we learned, and it wouldn't have knit us together. God knew that a couple years later, Larry was going to retire. We didn't know that. We knew he eventually would, but we didn't know exactly the time. And it just brought us closer together as a staff. It was just amazing to see. God does those things for us, but he does them because we're serving his people. We're serving the missionaries. We're doing what he's asked us to do. And he desires for those missionaries that come to get the rest and refreshment that they need, and he gives us the opportunity to provide that for them. And the thing that I find so interesting is that passage that I mentioned, his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Now, is there anything about the words yoke and burden that sound light or easy? Of course not. I'm blessed at Siloam. When I mow our 33 acres, I get to use a riding lawnmower. I certainly wouldn't want to push mow it all, because that would be a burden. That would be a yoke. It's still kind of bouncy on the riding lawnmower, but at least I'm sitting on the mower and I don't have to push it. But God says, when you surrender things to me, I make it seem as light as a feather, because I'm with you. I have all the authority. I have all the power. And what seems like a mountain to you is going to become like just a tiny little pebble. You just have to trust me. And that's what we try to do at Siloam Missionary Homes. We try to provide that place where when the missionaries are on the field and all of a sudden it seems like everything is a mountain to them. Everything is a burden. Everything is a trial. Everything is a struggle. They come off the field. They've got this list of churches that they have to report to, and they just want a break. That's what we're able to provide for them at Siloam. I actually have, we started a new thing this year. It's called the Joy Jar. Our theme this year is actually Serve with Joy. So that's our theme for this year, Serve with Joy. And so we did a Joy Jar, because sometimes we just need to be reminded of what God does, right? Sometimes we forget God does something for us and we don't remember. So I've encouraged the missionaries and the staff, when God answers a prayer, write it down and put it in the Joy Jar. And we'll collect them throughout the year. And we're going to keep doing this every year. And it's going to become our journal, really, of what God has done in the lives of the missionaries and the lives of the staff members. So here's what a missionary wrote. It's anonymous, so I actually don't know who wrote it. This was March 30th of this year. He daily loads us with benefits. It would be more than enough to just live here at Siloam, but the extra built-in blessings just keep piling up. Good, reliable internet, loving, attentive staff, a workout room to strengthen my back, printer access so we don't have to drive to town for copies. As our work brings us in close contact with much suffering and the evils that grieve God's heart and destroy those he loves, these clear evidences of God's presence in kindnesses, goodness, sacrificial giving, provision are like spring flowers coming through the snow's crust. The gifts God blesses us with are part of his answer to a prayer, first prayed by Moses and recorded for us in Psalm 90, verses 14 through 17. Satisfied in his hesed, or love, fortifies us to labor in the trenches. So that was one missionary saying exactly what we want to hear. We have found in this place the thing that is giving us the strength to go back and do what we need to do. And I will tell you, even after 4 years, that yes, there are times that some of the details of the ministry can get discouraging. Times. But most of the time, when I walk out my front door and I walk over to the office, because my commute is, like 100 steps to the office from my house. As I walk over there, I almost, in some ways, feel guilty at times because I feel like I'm getting paid to do the thing I love the most. And I do. I love what I do at Siloam. Our staff loves what we do at Siloam. We're like a tiny little family of people that are not related to each other. Well, some of us are related to each other, but we're not all related to each other. And it's just amazing to see how God works. I want to share a couple more stories, and then if there are any questions, I'll open up for some questions. But we had one family that came, they actually left China. They were with Pioneer Mission, and they got warning that there had been kind of a security breach, and their identities to the Chinese government had probably been revealed that they were missionaries, and that they had 48 hours to leave. So they packed up, they left, they came back to the United States. It was totally unplanned. They had no place to go. Their kids didn't have room in their houses. So over the course of 3 months, they lived in 17 different places. Now, can you imagine 17 different places in 3 months? There's no stability, there's no rest, there's no privacy. There's certainly no recovery from the trauma of leaving your place of service so suddenly. And then a spot opened up for them at Siloam. And they actually, unfortunately, had to move. The spot that opened up was only available for a short time, and then they had to move to a different house, but it was still on our campus. And they ended up staying with us while they built a house out in Murphy, North Carolina. And he commented, he did a short video, and he said, "You have no idea how wonderful it was, after being in 17 different places, to walk through the door and feel like we were at home." And that's why Siloam exists. We had another family, also actually from China. They were a younger family, and they had 4 young children, and they taught at an international school, and their visas ran out. So they actually came back to the U.S. to renew their visas, and then COVID happened, and they couldn't get back into the country. They had the same problem. They were just planning on being out for a few weeks. It was just going to be a short process, and they were going to jump right back to China. So they ended up living with, I think it was his parents or her parents, I forget which, in one bedroom. 2 parents, 4 kids, all slept in one bedroom, and these were the type of parents who they had done raise their kids, and they didn't like noise. They didn't like the grandkids being around. They didn't like the grandkids playing in the house. They lived under that for like 4 months, where their kids felt like they couldn't be kids. They really couldn't play anywhere in the house, and they all slept in the same room for 4 months. So when they contacted us, we had an opening, and it was for like our smallest house. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. And they were like, "We don't care. Anything's better than 1 room." They got to campus and found out we had animals and the kids and space for the kids to run. And I mean, those kids were everywhere. Everywhere. Sweetest kids, not obnoxious, but they loved running around 33 acres. They had a creek to play in. They had playgrounds to play on. One of them was right behind their house. Then about a month later, some other missionaries who were transitioning from China actually to another country for a different reason, they came on campus, also with 4 kids. The first family had 4 girls. The second family had 4 boys, exact same ages. I mean, exact same ages. And it's interesting because the second family that came, The dad had gotten burnt out reporting to churches. He was like, everywhere we go, all I do is answer questions. I don't have any friends. I start making a friend, and then we have to go to the next church. He's like, I'm burnt out. I'm done. I just want to go sit in a house and not do anything and not see anybody. That's what he said when they came to Siloam. So they moved into the house actually next to me. And their kids, their 4 boys, went exploring. Well, I mean, I already told you the 4 girls were running all over the campus. They met the 4 girls. Guess what? They were from the same country. They ministered in the same country. They were the same age. They had the same interests. They went running back to the house. Mom, Dad, you got to come meet. And as soon as they heard that, the dad was like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to meet anybody. I don't want to make friends. No, Dad, they're really nice. You got to come meet them. Okay, so they wore him down, and he finally gave in and met the other couple that had been in China with the parents of the 4 girls. So they were together on campus for 2 months, and in that 2-month period, they became best friends. Their kids became best friends. The 2 husbands became best friends. The 2 wives became best friends. And when I did an exit interview with that second family, he said, you know what? My attitude was so poor when I came here. It was so bad, so negative when I came here. I said I wasn't going to make any friends, and he said I was wrong. God had better things for me. And he said, I have made a lifelong friend here. My wife has made a lifelong friend, and my kids have made lifelong friends, and we wouldn't have had that had we not come to Siloam. Now, I don't share those stories to say our staff is amazing, though I do think our staff is amazing. But this is not, Siloam Missionary Homes is not something that man has done. I promise you. I'm there all the time, and I still can't believe that when Larry and Joyce first looked into buying that property, that it was 16 acres of trees with a huge ravine in the middle of it. And now there's this campus with all these houses and the office building and all these other things. Man didn't do that. God did. Siloam Missionary Homes is a testimony to God and what he can do if his people are willing to be used. And all these stories about missionaries, it's all about what God does. God brings us missionaries our way that need to be at Siloam at a certain stage of their life. And we are blessed and privileged to just be one small part of God's working in their lives. And all the churches that support us, all the churches that come and bring food, all the churches that come and do work teams at Siloam, all of those, including you all, are part of what God has done in 30 years. Those 300 families, you had a part in ministering to them. The 100 countries that they came from and went back to, you had a part in reaching those countries with the gospel because of what you did for Siloam Missionary Homes and for those missionaries. So what we do is different, it's unique, but it's also important, and it's been used by God in a great way. And I thank you all for not only being part of it, but for letting me come and share a little bit about what's going on now. We actually, next week, we start our big work teams. We have a group coming down from Indiana. We'll start, it's going to be hot. For some reason, they always bring the 100-degree heat with them from Indiana. I don't know why. So we're going to start at 7 in the morning, and we end our day at about 7 at night. I actually got COVID about 1.5 years ago, and my stamina is like this. I have no stamina left whatsoever. I'm not looking forward to 4 days in a row of going 12 hours all day in the heat. But you know what? That's what we do. That's what God has called us to do. And so we have that work team. We have a 2-week break, and then we have another work team come for 3 days. And that's kind of our 2 big work teams for the summer. And then we'll start gearing back down and getting ready for the cooler weather in the fall, thank goodness. And we're going to take about 1.5 years. We're at the point now where we actually need another staff member, but we don't have the finances for it. We don't have the finances to hire somebody else. We think we found the person, and they're actually local. They're about 3 minutes away from us. But we're going to just take some time over the next 1.5 years and kind of catch up on a lot of just little things at Siloam that you know how it is around your house. You have your to-do list and you go, I'm going to get to that. But then you don't get to that. Then you add another item to your to-do list. Well, I'm going to get to that too. Then you never get to that. Well, we have a list that's probably longer than, the walls here of those little things that we've been like, yeah, we're going to get to that. Well, we're going to get to that. So we're actually not taking on any large projects, no more new houses for the next little bit, no more huge building projects, and we're just going to focus on making sure our staff doesn't burn themselves out serving the missionaries. So that's kind of where we're at right now. But God has been good. Everything that God has provided has been paid for. Even the new house that went in was paid for. Siloam Missionary Homes does not have any debt, does not have any loans. It is all free and clear to the glory of God. And we continue to do His work in His way, and we're just thankful that you all can be a part of it, and that we can share with you. So, that being said, do y'all have any questions at all about Siloam, about anything we're doing, anything like that? Yes?
Michael, I just want to say on behalf of everybody here tonight, in spite of the interruptions you had, you have carried out a tremendous lesson for us about Siloam Missionary.
Well, thank you. I enjoy sharing Siloam. I enjoy preaching. If you ever need a preacher. Actually just spoke for his friend, Derek Smith, at 2 Sundays in a row at his church. But to me, there's nothing better than sharing what God has done. Whether it's in my life, Siloam, whatever it is, just from His Word. What better thing could you do?
Did Larry and Joyce still live in the house that was built for Larry?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a 1-story ranch with concrete floors, everything. Yeah. Basically, we built an ADA compliant home without getting it certified, but we basically built an ADA compliant home for the time that Larry might eventually get wheelchair bound. Larry has done really well. He actually got into a study at Duke University and got an experimental treatment for Parkinson's that is actually found to be very effective. So he wears essentially, it's an insulin pump, but it's not for insulin. It's for whatever drug they use to control his Parkinson's. It actually stays in his system all day, and it's regulated just like an insulin pump would regulate insulin for a diabetic. So, and it has been very effective. Right now, just as a prayer request, he is having some extreme fatigue, and they're not really sure why. Is it because he just started a new role at the church and is still working another job and is just busy? We're not really sure, but the reality is Parkinson's is eventually going to start causing deteriorations in his health. His father died of Parkinson's, so they know what to expect. But thus far, God has been very good, and Larry has been very active. And like I say, he has not stopped advocating on behalf of Siloam Missionary Homes. About once a week, he calls me and says, "Hey, I ran into so and so. They're going to call you, or you need to call them." Or he's always looking out for us. So it's good to be able to be that close still to them. And Joyce I would not survive without Joyce. I wish she worked more than 3 days a week, but God has been using her in other ways, and that is fine. Larry and Joyce deserve the time to do what God has called them to do at this stage of their life. So that is what we're letting them do. Anything else?
Tell where your kids went to high school.
Well, two of my kids went to Orange High over here. So I lived in Evelyn. My last one actually just graduated from North Carolina Cyber Academy, so it was an online charter school. And so she just graduated from there, along with taking several classes at Alnex Community College. And so my last one is jumping ship later this summer, and all 3 of my kids, I will be an empty nester. I don't feel old enough to be an empty nester, but I will be an empty nester. So that will be a big change for us. But good timing, since we'll probably be doing a lot of traveling for so long. So yeah, well, 2 of them are both going to be in Wilmington. My 2 daughters are going to be in Wilmington. One lives there as an adult, and my youngest is going to UNC Wilmington she wants to go into criminal justice and work for the FBI. So we'll see if that actually happens or not. Well, if any of you would like, I have our latest newsletter. I brought it with me, so if you're not on our newsletter list, I'd love to have you take our latest newsletter. We'll be doing another one probably in about 3 or 4 weeks. So if you're not on the list and would like to be, let me know. We do 3 newsletters and a Christmas letter every year. And we're going to start including some of the quotes from the Joy Jar from the Missionaries, and just we try for the newsletter to not just be a report, but also to be an encouragement of what God is doing, so that there's some spiritual blessing for you when you read our newsletter and not just a bunch of news.
Is Betty still putting recipes in it?
She is, yeah. Let's see, what was this one? This was salmon patties. She had 2 different salmon patty recipes in this one. So, yep, she still does the recipes. Yes, sir.
You have 8 staff members. Can you tell who they are, what they do, and also through the course of the year, I know that there are opportunities for churches to come and help serve. Can you elaborate on some of those?
So obviously I'm the president and kind of director. We don't really have a director per se right now. I would love to hire one eventually, but we need a groundskeeper first. And my wife actually, even though she has suffered because of Lyme and still has a lot of ongoing health issues, she works 12 hours a week in the office and does accounts receivable. So as payments come in, as checks come in, she processes them, enters them in the computer, who they're from, and does the bank deposits. Joyce is still the office manager and works 3 days a week. So she works, my wife works Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Joyce works Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. Betty works whenever she wants to. Now, Milton's there every day. He's our missionary pastor, and then Betty is our bookkeeper, accounts payable, and she works about 4 days a week, give or take. And Milton and Betty have their own support. So when he retired from the ministry, they raised support. So they actually are fully supported and basically raised their own salary. We also have on staff Daniel Zeke. He is our maintenance director. He is an old 23. He's 23 years old. When we hired him, when we interviewed him, he was 20. But he worked for like a water restoration and water and fire damage company before he came to us. And if he can look at a manual, he can fix it. He can read electrical diagrams, maintenance, like appliance diagrams. He welds. He does about everything. The only thing he really doesn't like to do is do yard work. He doesn't like to mow. But he does about everything else. He's very extremely experienced. You never know with the work that he does that he's only 23 years old. Rachel George is Larry and Joyce's daughter. She is now vice president at Siloam Missionary Homes and is also the director of Camp Glory Farm, which is our ministry with the animals. So not only do we minister with the animals to the children, but we are also developing a reverse field trip. So this last year, we went to Wesleyan Christian Academy in High Point, and we took the animals to the kids and got to be able to share with them a little bit about God's creation with sheep, alpacas, and goats, and we had a great experience doing that. And Rachel also then is kind of in charge of the camp aspect when we have week-long work teams come on site in the summer. And then Kendrick Tyre was an intern and is now a full-time staff member, and she's our farm manager. She handles the day-to-day dealing with the animals. Rachel's had rotator cuff surgery twice due to some pretty major tears, and really, she can still do some things, but the day-to-day operations of the farm, we leave to Kendrick. I think she's 23 or 24 years old too. So we have a good variety in age. We got a couple of young bucks, and we got my wife and I kind of in the middle, and then everybody else is almost old enough to be my parent. So that's our staff. Throughout the year, we take volunteers who can do about anything. We have a group of ladies that often come help us fold and stuff stuff our newsletters into envelopes to send them out and do the labels. Weeding, painting, some construction work, cleaning, pressure washing. There's all kinds of stuff to do. We just had a group, we actually a week ago, we had a younger group come from one church, and they built picnic tables and cleaned up a bunch of brush that was overgrown. And then 3 days later, we had an adult group come from a different church, and they finished the cleaning up of the brush process. So we have stuff that can be done all year round, even painting. We have a bunch of front doors, they're metal doors. We have a bunch of doors that need painted. You know, that's just one of those things that you never really get around to doing, but they look a lot better if they were painted. So it's just those types of things. Occasionally a house will be empty for a period of time, and we may decide to redo the artwork and repaint the walls. And so there's always something to do at Siloam. We have one lady that comes weekly. All she does is clean the chapel. That's her ministry. She cleans the chapel, which is wonderful because you walk in and it smells like pine sol. It's not overpowering, but pine sol smells a whole lot better than mildew, which is what was growing there before she started doing that. One thing I did want to mention is, I mentioned briefly, we are supported by individuals and churches and stuff like that. We do charge the missionaries to stay, but we charge them a minimal amount. So the average family pays about $600 a month for their house, including utilities and internet. You don't find that at all. The average price in Burlington, which is what we kind of compare to, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Burlington in a bad neighborhood starts at about $1,300 a month, plus utilities, plus internet. So $600 a month is pretty cheap. But that also means our annual budget is about $400,000 a year. 15% of our budget comes from what the missionaries pay. And the rest of it comes from either us getting creative and selling stuff and recycling. We have a scrap metal trailer. We go get money for our scrap metal. If there's metal left over, we take it to the dump, or we take it to the scrap metal place. We sell sheep and goats. Every year we breed them and sell them. That's part of how we raise some of our own funds. Some of us have gone out on deputation and raised funds. But 54% of our support comes from individuals and churches. So we are very much faith-based, just like missionaries are, in being able to do what they do on the field. We're the same way. So.
I know one time we donated stuff for your store.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We brought stuff for your store.
I actually went and visited a church right around the corner from us. That's how they support us. They don't support us financially, but they actually bring about once a quarter, they do a food drive for Siloam Missionary Homes. And would you believe, I chose to randomly visit their church the Sunday that kicked off their food drive for Siloam. So that worked out really well. It's like, well, thank you very much and I appreciate when you guys have brought stuff out too. So yeah, all of that helps. We give out about $40,000 worth of food that goes through the food pantry every year between donations from churches like yours that bring canned goods and cereals and stuff like that. And we also get stuff from BJ's Wholesale in Burlington. They donate baked goods to us that are expiring. So, yeah. Anything else?
I was just wondering, have you had any missionaries come in from Ukraine since all this started?
No, we have not. We have a missionary right now that's has served in the Ukraine, but he was not in the Ukraine before he came. That was not his last place. He was actually going to go back and help with the ministry with refugees and some of the camps where people were having to gather just because their houses were destroyed, and it turned out to be a little bit too disorganized for his liking, so he did not end up going over. But we have not had any missionaries. Like I say, we've stayed full because of COVID and people not being able to get back into their place of service, or visa processes being greatly lengthened. So we haven't had a lot of openings. So really, since that whole conflict started, we haven't. We've heard of missionaries that have left, but we've not had it. And it is a bad situation. It is much worse than what is actually in the news. And I'll just leave it at that. Well, it is after 8 o'clock. Y'all have patiently listened to me for an hour, and I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share Siloam with you. Appreciate that y'all are doing the VBS for the kids. It's great to see all the kids out there playing, and I would love to see you either at Siloam or even back here again someday. So thank you very much.
Would you close us in prayer?
Certainly. Lord, we are grateful for all that you do. Lord, your power, your grace, your blessing is not limited just to those who serve you full time. It goes to all believers. And Lord, I thank you for this church here that is reaching out to the community, doing VBS, not only ministering to the kids, but even having something for the adults. And Lord, I thank you for their graciousness in allowing me to come tonight and just to talk about Siloam and what you have raised up through Larry and Joyce and many, many other shoulders over the years. I'm just thankful to be able to share that. And Lord, I just ask that you be with them this week here. Lord, I pray souls would be saved this week, that kids who do not know you as their Savior would come to know you. Lord, that if there's anyone that has any inkling of desire to enter full-time Christian service, that somebody would step forth this week and say, I'm willing to go, I'm willing to serve. And Lord, that would be a great blessing for this church as well. Lord, I thank you for being able to talk with Pastor Gregory some and get to know him a little bit, and just pray that you would just bless the ministry of the church. Give safety to the kids and to all the adults as they head home tonight. We just ask your blessing on